Welcome to the third day of Intercon's third edition. We are beginning day 3 with a really interesting session. Please give a round of applause for Dr. Alan Barnard, co-founder of Goldratt Research Labs and our first keynote speaker of the day. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. To error as human. So should we use AI then for all important decisions? My name is Alan Barnard. I've always been really curious about why good people make and often repeat bad decisions. And that's what my research lab does, is we study why good people make and often repeat bad decisions, both in business as well as in their personal lives. And we've developed a range of technologies, all various apps, to address each of these avoidable and consequential decision mistakes. It turns out that humans do make some decision mistakes that could have been avoided if we had used AI and computers for it. But to error is not just human, it's natural. The nature of the type of decisions that we make means that errors are mostly unavoidable. Can AI and computers help us to dramatically reduce and sometimes even avoid that? Well, we are extremely privileged to have partnered with some of the leading organizations in the world. I'll be presenting 2 case studies, one from Microsoft where we deployed these research insights, as well as an app to help them better manage their global supply chain, and in the process dramatically improve financial performance. And I'll also present a case study of how we've used the research insights and an app that we've developed to improve the mental health of young people, partnering with suicide prevention centers, because if you can think about the type of bad decisions that we make, considering to take your own life is probably right at the top. So let's get started. When we are working with organizations, there's basically 3 questions that we're trying to answer. The first one is why the current level of performance is probably the best that they can do considering. Now, considering what? Considering the level of complexity that they face, considering the resources that they have, but also the decision rules that they have. Once we understand that, the next question is, can you do better? Much better or just a little bit better? And then the last question is how best to do much better. What's the simplest, fastest, lowest cost, lowest risk way of doing much better? So let's go to the outline. I'll start off with a brief history behind that quote, to error is human. How bad is to error is human really at the moment? How big is the problem, the size of the problem? It affects every single aspect of our lives. I'll share some poll results of what other people thought. We sent out polls in the various social media platforms to see what people think about this question. Should we just outsource all the important decisions? We make about 35,000 decisions every single day. It can be quite overwhelming. The good news is that most of those don't matter, even if they might feel like they're really important at the moment, like what to wear or what to eat. In the bigger scheme of things, they don't matter, but there's a few that matter a lot. Getting those right or wrong really can make a big difference. So it's interesting to see what people say. Why is it so easy to make these decision mistakes in the world that we live in today? Which of these errors or decision mistakes and delays really matter and which don't? And which of these errors can be reduced or even avoided by AI and computers? And I will ask that we look at a slightly different definition for AI today. AI is generally defined as computers mimicking human intelligence. We don't want to mimic human intelligence when there's inherent flaws in human intelligence and practical limitations in terms of our cognitive capability. So we want to use AI to enhance human intelligence. And as I mentioned, I'll present 2 case studies and maybe there's some opportunity for questions at the end. So the quotes around to error is human dates back to 40 BC. To error is human, but to persevere in error is only the act of a fool. To error is human, to forgive is divine, meaning that we gotta be erroring, but it takes courage to forgive yourselves and others when we do make errors, and that's an important part because as part of learning, we have to be able to fail. If we cannot fail, we cannot learn, and we cannot evolve as a species. We cannot improve our business if we are not creating an environment that's safe for people to fail in. As computers came on board, we started seeing the quote adjust a little bit to error is human, but to really foul things up requires a computer. Why? Because computers can amplify mistakes that we have. If there's biases in our algorithms, it can propagate that enormously. Who have forgotten about Y2K? It almost brought the world economy down, right? But if you think about it more practically, today we can use AI to learn how the best, for example, mental health counselors make decisions, or the best cardiologist. They can practically see maybe 8 or 10 or 15 people a day. So if one of them makes a mistake, it's very limited in terms of the scope of the impact. But when we codify that algorithm, we make it infinitely scalable, the damage that can be done could be enormous. And then, of course, the last quote is to err is human, but to blame it on a computer is even more so. Remember the Russia hack where one of our politicians said, it's not the Russians that's hacking us, it's our computer's fault. So it's been around for a long time, we're aware of it, but the damage keeps on increasing when we make errors. So there's very little data around it, but our own research is showing that about 60% of all shortages in the supply chain are due to human error, compared to forecast error. It's impossible to predict accurately how much somebody will buy of a specific product or service in a specific location. So there's inherent uncertainty around it. But overreactions, if you think about what happened with toilet paper and COVID-19, right? Overreactions, people overbuy, they overproduce because that overbuying sends a signal back to the supply chain that says people are buying a lot, produce more. By the time you've produced more, the demand is gone, and now you're sitting with a lot of surpluses, which is about 65% of all surpluses. And when we're talking about valuing this, we're talking about close to $1 trillion worth of excess inventory that's sitting in our supply chains today. And most of that is due to human error, not due to the inherent uncertainty that we find. About 70% of data loss is due to human error. Only 11% is due to hackers. 80% of airplane crashes due to human error, 90% of car crashes due to human error, and a very deeply concerning one is that human error in medical diagnosis and treatment is the third largest cause of death, shortly after heart disease and cancer. So it's a huge problem. In general, about 80% of all failures and defects are due to human error. So the question is, okay, so should we then not outsource everything to AI and computers? And this is what the poll said. About 30%, which is quite a high number, said yes, we should. About 70% said no. For me as a research scientist is to say, why is it so difficult to get decisions right? And you might have heard of this term called FUCA. I've added another C in there, but it basically explains why it's really hard to make good decisions in real-world conditions. There's volatility in demand and supply. There's volatility in reactions, how we react. We can't predict it accurately. There's uncertainty in terms of what the causes are. There's uncertainty about what the effects will be of our actions. There's complexity. There's many parts. These parts are interdependent. You ask somebody to prepare a sales forecast for a new product launch, and then you ask them, do you consider, when you're making that forecast for this new model, did you consider the level of inventory that's in the supply chain at the time that you're launching the new model? And they generally say no. You say, should you? Right? Because if there's a lot of the old model, the retailers will discount it and will dramatically reduce the sales of your new item. That's what complexity is. There's lots of parts, lots of interdependencies. There's constraints in terms of money, there's constraints in terms of time and people, and our ultimate constraint is our limited attention. The number of things that demand our attention will always exceed our available attention. So there's always constraints that we will have. We have to make decisions within a certain time frame. And lastly, there's ambiguity. Ambiguity is really interesting because it affects not just humans, but also AI. Ambiguity means you have multiple objectives that you're trying to achieve. You're trying to be effective, efficient, and compliant, and do things that are socially acceptable. Now, if you have multiple objective functions, it's extremely hard to make decisions. It's the same way that you're training an AI algorithm, a machine learning algorithm, and give them multiple objective functions. It's extremely hard for them to figure out what the hell are you trying to achieve. So it's really difficult to make these decisions. Let's just look at how it impacts us. So there's more and more VUCA in our environment. We put people into these environments. Many of the decisions we have to make is subjective. It's not objective. There's not a nice little formula that we can use to calculate what the answer is. We have to use our judgment and intuition. On top of that, we give people access to more and more data, and then we expect them to make decisions. So what do? They have simple coping mechanisms, simple rules, simple heuristics to make decisions, but they also get overwhelmed. And when they do, they make mistakes. Some of these mistakes are unavoidable, like if you have to forecast how much will sell of a specific product in a specific location, you're going to be wrong. You just don't know which direction. You'll either forecast too much or too little. If you're allocating budget for the rest of the year, you are going to be wrong. So we are going to make mistakes. Some of those are unavoidable, but many are avoidable. Of the avoidable mistakes, there are some that are inconsequential. They don't matter, but there's a few that matter a lot. And what we want to do is to focus on these. So we've looked at What are the key consequential decision mistakes that we all make in our personal lives, but also in business? We have to make commitments about goals that we're going to achieve. How much returns are we going to give our investors? How much output can we get out of our factories or our supply chain? How do you do that within a very complex environment? We have to decide what the impact of changes are going to be. We have to find a way of predicting what the impact of changes is going to be on us, on our organizations. We have to decide where to focus our scarcest resources. We have limited attention, we have limited time and budget. Of all the things that we can change and improve, where do we focus? It's very easy to make mistakes about that because everything looks like bottlenecks when we look at supply chains. We also have to decide what rules to use, and this is one of the trickiest ones that I want to share because often the rule that we need to use to optimize the system is very counterintuitive from a local perspective. A good example of that is, why do we all multitask? We know it's really bad, right? We get much less done, the quality suffers, it takes ages to get things done when you're multitasking. So multitasking and allowing you to be utilized too much is a really bad idea, but it makes perfect sense from a local perspective. So part of what I'm going to be showing you is building these massive digital twins that can accurately replicate not just business processes or businesses, but accurately replicate complete supply chains so that we can see what is the impact of changes, so that we can see which rules are best to optimize the system and not parts of the system. You buy a part that saves you $1 from China, but actually the total cost for procurement goes up. Locally, it looks like the right thing to do. System-wide, it's a really bad idea. How do we figure that out? And lastly, deciding when to change the rules. But are these mistakes that we make of a nature that can be avoided by AI and computers? And we've identified at least 4 types of mistakes that AI and computers do not make. When we throw complexity and volatility and uncertainty at AI and computers, they don't easily get overwhelmed. It's very easy for us today to be able to build these massive digital twins of environments and be able to press the play button and see what will happen. Or to run optimization engines to see what's best for the system versus what's best for the part. They don't suffer from fatigue or overwhelmed. There's a famous case studies of judges, parole board judges, and they were trying to see what is the percentage of parole that is granted by parole board judges. Beginning of the day, early in the morning, 65%. Before lunchtime, it goes down to 0. Then it bumps up to about 50% before they close, it's again 0. We're trying to figure out why. And the simple answer is we get fatigued when we are making decisions all the time. And when we are fatigued, we go to the safest possible option. And in their case, the safest possible option is not to grant parole. Computers don't suffer from fatigue. It can apply the same decision rule over and over and over with massive scalability without suffering from fatigue. Strong emotions impact our decisions. We overreact because of an exaggerated frustration with the status quo or an exaggerated expectation, both in our personal lives and in business. We quit our jobs, we get a divorce because of these exaggerated emotions, but we also procrastinate because of exaggerated fears of loss, risk, or effort. And these things are things that AI and computers do not suffer from. If we give them an algorithm, it can follow it exactly. But sometimes emotions are important. So we have to be careful. And lastly, intuition gaps. As AI can cope with incredibly complex systems, which of these 4 errors can be avoided and how? We can use digital twins today to overcome FUCA. Very soon, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll have a digital twin of yourself. You eat that piece of cheesecake, you put it into your digital twin on your app and you go, is this a good idea? And it will show you, it might make you feel really good now, but in 5 years' time you're going to be suffering from some kind of heart disease. In the same way that we can build digital twins of very complex systems. In terms of fatigue, we can use IT for automation, AI and computers. In terms of strong emotions, we've developed decision support apps that has been designed to prevent the common mistakes that we make due to limiting assumptions or beliefs or very strong emotions. And lastly, a very innovative application of AI is not to just learn from data, but to learn from the top expert. The top experts in every field is not just better, but much faster when it comes to decision making. There's a huge gap between quality and speed of a novice and an expert. And one of the applications that we've deployed with a partner of ours, Barnard, is using AI to be trained by the top expert on how they make very, very difficult decisions. And these top experts often outperform general machine learning algorithms by an order of magnitude in terms of the quality of their design. So let me share with you just 2 brief case studies. The first one is Microsoft. They approached us and said, we are busy redesigning our supply chain, our global supply chain. We want one design, one set of rules, that whatever products we put into the supply chain, we want it to come out at the back end in the fastest possible time, in the lowest possible cost, with the highest service levels and availability. Can you come up with a set of rules? We worked with top experts in this field. We came up with simple heuristics. We built a digital twin to test it, and then we deployed it in their IT system that allowed us, SAP, to scale it infinitely. The complexity, as you can imagine, of Microsoft's supply chain is massive. We're talking about 42,000 stock keeping units, about $8 billion of spend, going through to hundreds of thousands of customers around the world. And we were able to build a digital twin. And what I will share with you now is just a testimonial from the CTO of Microsoft to share the results that we had from this project.
My name is Robert Meshew. I'm Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft Supply Chain, responsible for everything from how we source product all the way through how we take care of customers if they have any sort of problem, running the technology, the prioritization of all those programs. And I'm faced with a lot of challenges. About a year and a half ago, we were faced with increasing supply chain complexity, rising inventory levels, increased number of markdowns, and a lot of demand variability, especially as we introduce new product categories such as HoloLens or Surface 2-in-1s. So we reached out to Goldratt Labs to really help us think through some of the nuances of the problem. And through that work, we were able to implement a new TOC planning model in our existing execution and supply chain systems. The outcome has been nothing short of remarkable. In that time, we've seen our service levels rise to our customers by a little over 5%. But at the same time, we've seen our inventory levels drop by $250 million across the board, which has led to reduced markdowns and reduced excess and obsolescence of about $100 million. So certainly everyone over here at Microsoft has moved from theory of constraints being just a theory to TOC actually being a reality that has really driven our business to a place that it wasn't before.
We've achieved these results. We started the project 1st of September. On the 15th of December, we went live with the new rules in their SAP system. That's a speed at which you can execute. We went through a couple of steps. The first step was designing a total turnaround strategy for them, identifying what are those decision rules that should be used for planning their supply chains, for executing them, for continuously improving it. The experts helped us to define that logic in terms of why each of the changes that we're proposing is needed. What's the objective of every change to bring people along and exactly how we're going to do that. And then we built a supply chain digital twin that allowed us to test whether these new best practices are really better. Is it actually going to help us to reduce shortages and surpluses? So we have a digital twin platform. We read in their data directly from their SAP system that basically helps us to define what that full supply chain is like. The platform is completely self-configurable, so if you give it data of one product made in one factory sold to one customer, it will build a digital twin of that. Or you can give it data of 40,000 SKUs sold to 100,000 different customers manufactured at 50,000 or 50 different contract manufacturers, and it will model that. And then you start adding in variability and dependencies that's not captured in a traditional IT system, so you can see the impact of variability and interdependencies. You then get a range of outputs. You can run these models as a single run. You can do sensitivity analysis, for example, sensitivity analysis on forecast accurately. How dependent is it? They're using it as a global product launch simulator. When the Xbox is launched, they can say, what if we sold 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% more? What if we sold 10, 20, 30, 40% less than forecasted? How will our supply chain cope with it? What will our operational performance be? Where will there be bottlenecks? When we are setting up the model, so that's what the picture looks like. This is a little video that just shows you, we're reading in the data, you select a file that reads in the data of whatever scenario you've described, and we're going to be modeling this supply chain for a full year, modeling every single event that's taking place in the supply chain, and we're going to be comparing that with the previous performance to see could we have done better. This is generating all the orders. Those are ships and planes going through. This is modeling the actual inventory levels, what it was in the past. The purple line is what it was previously. The blue line is what it could be with these new rules that have been defined. So you can see on the middle section there is the total inventory levels, and on the right-hand side is the total lost sales. So we are able to dramatically reduce inventory levels. So the purple line is what it was before, the blue line is what it could have been. We're able to reduce dramatically inventory levels. That spike that you see there was an overreaction by planners causing surplus inventory to be stuck in the supply chain, and at the same time we've almost completely eliminated lost sales on the back end side. And the simulation is not just a black box. You can dive into it, you can see where the shortages and surpluses was taking place and how it could have been avoided with just using different rules that are more demand driven, that are listening to feedback. One of the interesting insights is one of the algorithms that they developed is how do you allocate product when you're launching a product, right? So you get forecasts from all your customers, Best Buy, Amazon. Each of them say you give them an allocation of 10,000 units per week. And the problem now is they expect you to keep that allocation. So maybe one of the customers orders only 5,000. The system remembers that they have an unallocated volume of 5,000 because they were granted 10,000, and it keeps that back in the warehouse. Another customer orders 15,000. It says, sorry, you have an allocation of only 10,000. So you short supply them by 5,000 when actually you had the stock sitting in the warehouse. So he said, what if we just change that rule? And suddenly lost sales reduced by about 30 million in this case, just for this one product category. So that's what we've done when we're dealing with really large, complex systems where people are making decisions every single day. When they get those decisions right or wrong, it can have a huge impact both operationally and financially, but also on the stress of the people. We're measuring what the stress levels are when you're making these really big decisions, and you know that they are so consequential, it's massive, compared to being able to automate those decisions and allow the humans to use their intuition to monitor the system and resolve inconsistencies. The second case study, the last one I want to share is using decision-making apps. We've developed one called Harmony Decision Maker. It's a free app that you can download from all the app stores. It really has been designed to prevent 5 common decision mistakes we all make when strong emotions gets involved in our decision-making. The psychologists are using this and counselors because it gives them much larger scalability. They can have multiple students working on their decisions. They can share their progress of their analysis of their decision with the psychologist or counselor. They can also share their implementation status. I'll share with you a video that was produced by a group of students that are using this app in suicide prevention centers and also in their schools.
What will be better, faster decisions when it really matters?
So you might have noticed that there's a functionality in the app where people can share their decision analysis. Obviously, they can do it privately or publicly. If they share it publicly, it goes into the community library. They can do that anonymously or with their full name. But this allows you to go into the community library and search and say, I'm currently struggling with thoughts of suicide, or I currently don't know what to go and study, or I don't know whether to quit my job and start my own business. And you'll see from around the world other users that have had similar decisions, and you can go and listen to their story, see how they did their analysis, what assumptions did they challenge that helped them to make a better, faster decision.
What will people see?
As I mentioned, the app has been designed around basically a few steps that goes through. Each of these steps have been designed to prevent a common decision mistake. If there's anybody that's interested, we'll have details at the back end that you can go and follow, but you can also download the app from all the various app stores today, and it will show you how to actually make better decisions. The first mistake that you're trying to prevent is either procrastinating an important decision or wasting time on an unimportant one. Then it says what's the options you have, what's the pros and cons of each of these options, coming up with new options that each have more pros and less cons, using your own and other people's intuition about all the yes buts to build a more robust solution, and then helping you design an experiment to go and try it out, and then sharing your progress with counselors. So to wrap up, what is our conclusion? I started off with the question, is to err as human, should we not just outsource all decisions to AI? Hopefully what I've done today is to share with you some insights that we've gained, that to err is not just human, it's natural and necessary to learn, but humans do make avoidable and consequential mistakes, and AI and computers can be used to reduce or even avoid such mistakes, but AI and computers also do have real limitations. So we should not delegate all important decisions to AI. It's really about understanding what are those decisions that AI and computers are uniquely capable of making much better, much faster at scale, and what are the decisions that really should be left to humans, maybe providing information from AI to support their decision making. So I hope that you found it interesting, and we have a few minutes open for questions. And as I mentioned when I started, I think we should look at AI not as mimicking human intelligence, but rather just enhancing it. Thank you.